Well, thank you, Father Jim, for inviting me. I'm actually happy, very, very happy to be here with you as well. You asked a few different questions to help focus our conversation today, and I've given it some prayer and thought, and I'd like to respond. First, you said, well, how do you promote vocations in the midst of a pandemic? And I think the most important thing we want to remember is that while the vocation office and the chancery may be closed, the vocation ministry continues. God is still loving, God is still inviting, God is still challenging us to really not give in and be a people of hope. We're Easter people. The last word was not Good Friday, and certainly this pandemic has caused all of us and our life to come to a screeching halt. But in the midst of that experience, how do we do the deep dive spiritually? How do we continue to find God in the midst of the mess, the inconvenience, the suffering, and the pain? So the first thing I think that we all owe to those who are suffering with this coronavirus and their families, those who have died, our prayer and our support. We owe a tremendous amount of gratitude to nurses and doctors and first responders, those people who so generously are living their lives for the sake of others. So I think while this isn't necessarily how we would intend to plan World Day of Prayer for Vocations, there are certainly a lot of signs of the Spirit at work, inviting young people to notice the generosity and the faith and the goodness of people who really are stepping up, making tremendous sacrifices, and helping to make a difference for good in the world. So we're working remotely, which is very different. So I live here at St. Paul's Parish, and I think it's been very important to stay connected to people and to use the gifts of social media. So Zoom groups, email, FaceTime, text, calls. I'm as busy now as I ever have been. We've established 5 Zoom groups that meet every week, and they've been going wonderful. And the interesting thing also is, I'm not sure we would have had so much engagement if it wasn't because of the pandemic, because a lot of people are locked in, or a lot of people may have decided in the midst of this crisis that they really want to make room for God and start thinking more seriously about some of the questions that might have been a part of their life. But Bishop Bambera will celebrate the World Day of Prayer for Vocations Mass this Saturday at 4 o'clock at the Cathedral. And every year we go to a different Episcopal region to gather with young people. So with youth groups or religious education, families, etc., young people from colleges. So while we'll be doing that from the cathedral, an empty cathedral, speaking to them, I also was on this morning with the youth ministers and religious ed coordinators on Zoom, and just talking to them about ways that they can stay connected with the families. So they're all going to be kind of working on that in their own parishes. I've sent information to the Secretary for Catholic Schools and the Superintendent of Schools and the Directors of Religious Ed and youth ministers free lesson plans that are available. So the wonderful thing, a lot of these ministries that are supporting vocations, they're offering free online services for people. So if families want to pursue this, I think it's going to invite the domestic church to really look at how do we come together to pray, how do we invite God into the midst of how do we find God in the midst of this. A lot of the young people that I've been talking to are saying, Father, especially like high school or college young people, they say, we haven't had family meals like this in a while.
Right,
and
right.
Also talking about conversations with the family, or maybe older brothers helping younger siblings with their homework or whatever, or just going outside and playing sports and hanging out. So for the most part, it's pretty positive. And then sometimes, like 6 or 7 weeks in, they would say we're somewhat stir crazy, and it is really starting to get to us. So it's a mixed bag, but primarily I would say it's very positive of what God is doing with them. Sister Mindy and Dominic and myself and Shannon have sponsored a Bold Choices retreat for young people, and it comes from Pope Francis, who in one of his talks at World Youth Day said, don't be afraid of the Spirit who calls you to make bold choices. So we've developed this very positive and very successful retreat for young adults, and we were hoping to offer it in the spring. So we're looking at ways now to do it virtually. And so again, I think we got to think outside the box. The second thing that we have done with great success and faith inspiration is XLT. So again, Eucharistic adoration, worship, praise, speak. So we're in the process of trying to launch that again virtually, and again with the engagement of young people through social media. So that's very exciting. And as I talk to young people this weekend and encourage them to stay open to God, God's desire for their life, as a vocation director, Bishop Bambera has asked me to do three things to help enhance the vocation perspective in the life of our parishes and schools. We are all called and gifted for mission because of our baptism. We're priestly people, and we're gifted, and our call is to love, and that's unique for all of us, whether it's about marriage, single, priesthood, religious life, or a diaconate, lay ecclesial ministry. We all have the primary vocation to love. Then second is to work with women and men religious. So like yourself, the Passionists, the Jesuits, Holy Cross, we've been blessed with many wonderful religious communities of men and religious women, the Immaculate Heart of Mary, religious Sisters of Mercy, the Sisters of Christian Charity, again, the Passionist Sisters. So we have beautiful communities in our diocese. So my hope is that if a young woman wants to take a closer look, then I would connect her with Sister Kathy Kurtzel, our delegate for religious, and then I would kind of put them in connection with some of the vocation directors for religious communities. What I'm excited, right now, we have 11 men in formation for the diocese, 10 that are currently in. We just accepted one young man to start in September. But we have about 8 men in formation for religious communities, and I think 4, at least 4, maybe more, women in formation. So God is blessing us with many women who have taken the closer look. So that's kind of my long answer to your first question. Is that okay?
Sure, perfect.
Okay, all right. The second thing you asked me is, how is it that you are choosing to walk with vocation discerners in the midst of the pandemic? So what I did with the help of Dominic Costantino, who's our vocation program coordinator and much more social media sophisticated than I am, is we just reached out to all our contacts and we said, okay, who is interested in participating in a Zoom group? I alluded to the fact that we have 5 different ones. So we said, okay, how about every week, who wants to connect? And so the groups that we have, like one is a group made up of college and working young adults, men who are discerning. Second would be a group of high school juniors and seniors from Holy Cross, Holy Redeemer, Notre Dame, who have been a part of our God squads. So do they want to Zoom in? Then we have a third group. We meet with our seminarians who are in parishes. They're actually at home, and 2 of them are in the seminary. And then we have the assistant vocation directors who are meeting every week to keep saying, how do we keep the Spirit alive? How do we do this? And then the final group is we have the Quo Vadis Vocation Camp every summer. So we invited all the guys to participate. And so what happens is every week, Dominic sends out the link, and then the guys kind of join us. So what we do is very simply, we check in with each other. How are you doing? What's happening in your life? And then we do the gospel for the past Sunday. We read the gospel, we talk about the homily, and we're asking, okay, what are you hearing in this that's good news for you? And then what does this mean for our life in pandemic mode? How do we hear the good news? How do we experience Easter in the midst of this Good Friday? So they've been really tremendous. And then, do they have any questions around vocational discernment? And then, who do you want to pray for? And then we're especially committed to praying for healing of those who are affected by the coronavirus, to praying for the first responders, those who are on the front lines, whether it has to do with coronavirus or those that are helping with food distribution or helping other people like your parish is doing so beautifully. And then we close it for so it's an hour. But the other thing that I've asked is, okay, is there anybody that wants to meet personally in between that time? So what's happening is through FaceTime, Zoom, or calling, I've been meeting with a good number of guys who want to look at their prayer life and vocational discernment. So we have this great book by Ronald Rolheiser, Prayer, Our Deepest Longing, and just using that as a foundation, because really any vocational discernment really roots itself in our relationship with Jesus. And ultimately saying, what do you want me to do for you? How do you want me to join you? How is it I am called to live my life? So we've had great conversations with some guys on just looking at their prayer life. When do you pray? Where do you pray? How do you pray? You know, what's going well? What do you believe God may be asking? So for a lot of guys, what I'm noticing is they seem to be open to growing. And even like, you know how the disciples said to Jesus, Lord, teach us how to pray. You know, so in this time, I have had a tremendous privilege of trying to accompany young people while they grow in their spiritual lives, which I think is going to be the most important foundation for any kind of real serious vocational discernment. At the same time, with some discerners, I'm using a book that's called Is Jesus Calling You to be a Catholic Priest? And it has 10 vocation lessons that are really helping guys to understand the necessary foundation stones that you really have to put in place if you are going to move forward in freedom and in faith with any kind of seriousness. And that's been really wonderful. So we'll commit to, okay, let's read these 2 lessons, then we talk. And what I have found is for the guys that have accepted this possibility for their formation, it's really been very helpful, you know, wherever God is leading them. So for me personally, I'm just trying to help them to pray and to learn how to discern. And again, what is your vocation? God's special plan for your life. You know, what is God's dream or vision? In this culture, most of the guys are hearing, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do with your life? It's all about us. But really, the vocation is not about us. It's about what is God going to do in us and through us for the life of the church. And so inviting guys to switch the focus from myself and what I want to what does God want. You know, many times it's taking them outside the box. Many times it's taking them to a place that's not anything that they would have imagined. But if they can stay open, they really are getting freer and more peaceful with the possibilities that they may be called to be a priest. There is a great quote from Cardinal O'Connor, who ordained me a bishop, or a priest, excuse me. He was our bishop in Scranton, who ordained me a priest, and Bishop Bambera, I meant to say, 36 years ago. When he went to be the Archbishop of New York, he met with Mother Teresa, and he asked her, what advice would you give me as I take on this new responsibility? And you know what she said? 3 words: give God permission. And I think if I have any hope or desire for the young people that are discerning, is give God permission to speak to your heart. Give God permission to direct your life and to help you to know how is it that you really are going to serve God in the best way. You know, I think I know what I want, but God knows what I need and what the best thing for the church would be. So that's, again, a long answer to the second question.
Very good. It's great. Thank you.
All right, the third question that you posed would be, what kind of priest is needed in a time like this? Well, I would say the first and foremost thing is a man of prayer. You know, we have to be, again, grounded in our relationship with Jesus. The second thing I would say is we need a man who is comfortable with mess. It doesn't get messier than this. But life is messy. People's lives are filled with grace and hardship and difficulty. And if we are called to accompany them in the journey of life, then we just have to really make a commitment to meet people where they are and as they are, without judgment or without expectation, and to try to give them permission. Like we heard in the gospel of the two disciples on the road to Emmaus. You know, Jesus didn't impose, he didn't interrupt. He just said, what are you discussing? So I think for us to be able to meet people where they are and just invite that open-ended reflection on where they are in life's journey with their joys and struggles, and how is it that they can stay connected. I think we need a leader. We need a person who has leadership skills, because you know, the priest has a significant role in the life of a faith community. And so I think you don't have to be perfect in any of these areas, certainly, but I do think you have to have some leadership potential, which certainly it develops over the years. But I think you have to be a team player and a collaborator. I think you have to especially be able to recognize the gifts of the people of God. I think we owe that to them, but it's also necessary to work with religious women and men and people of other faiths, but also to realize that the Spirit is also working in the lives of many lay men and women who are just anxious to share their gifts and are willing to be with us in the building up of the kingdom and the proclaiming of the gospel. I think somebody has to be very flexible. I think they have to be patient. You know, I guess those are some of the good things I would say, you know, as that's what I think at this time. Like, I really think we, you know, some people say you have to be able to think outside the box. I think we need new boxes, you know, we just, there's new paradigms. Like it's just, we got to go out. These are just very different times. Some people are saying, I can't wait to get back to the way it was. We may never get back to the way it was. Right. We may be called to this just whole new way of relating and experiencing church and proclaiming the gospel, and it's going to require tremendous flexibility and patience and I think discernment to just listen to, you know, where is God in all this and how do we do it? And the other thing, not just like I think as like churches, we got to think together, work together. We got to be open to new ways. Pope Francis has a message for this World Day of Prayer for Vocations, and I'd like to just read a paragraph if I could. He says, on this day in particular, but also in the ordinary pastoral life of our communities, I ask the Church to continue to promote vocations. May she touch the hearts of the faithful and enable each of them to discover with gratitude God's call in their lives, to find courage to say yes to God, to overcome all weariness through faith in Christ, and to make of their lives a song of praise for God, for their brothers and sisters, and for the whole world. May the Virgin Mary accompany us and intercede for us. So I think Pope Francis, while we recognize that a good part of this day is about praying for ordained ministry and religious life in all its forms, he really recognized the need to really raise up priestly people and celebrate, you know, the goodness of God in the life of all of us.